The way I took led across the state line and south, then west. Ollie Shattuck would not follow me beyond the line of the state, so I put Tennessee behind me before the hills had a shadow. It was wild land, through which the trail led west out of Tennessee into Arkansas, the Ozarks, and by lonely trails into Kansas. When I rode at last into the street at Baxter Springs, folks figured me for one more mountain renegade coming to help keep tick-infested cattle out of the country, but I was of no such mind. It was 8 miles to where the Texas men held their cattle, so I rode, expecting no warm welcome from a stranger. Riding clear of the circling riders, I rode up to the fire, smelled of grub, turning my insides over. 2 days I'd been without eating, no money left, and too proud to ask for what I could not pay. A short, square man with a square face and a mustache called out to me. "You there, on the gray! What do you want?" "A job if one's to be had, and a meal if you've got grub to spare. My name is Tyrell Sackett, and I'm bound westward from Tennessee toward the Rockies. But if there's a job, I'll ride straight up to it." He looked me over mighty sharp, and then he said, "Get down, man, and come to the fire. No man was ever turned down from my fire without a meal inside him. I'm Belden." When I'd tied Dapple, I walked up to the fire, and there was a big, handsome man lying on the ground by the fire, a man with a golden beard like one of those Vikings Pa used to tell of. "Hell," he said agreeably. "It's a farmer." "What's wrong with farming?" I asked him. "You wouldn't have your belly full of beans right now if they'd not been farmed by somebody." "We've had our troubles with farmers, Mr. Sackett," Belden said. "There's been shooting. The farmers killed a man for me." "So," said a voice alongside, "so maybe we should kill Farmer." He had an itch for trouble, and his kind I'd met before. He was a medium tall man with a low-hanging shoulder on his gun sight. His black brows met over his nose, and his face was thin and narrow. If it was trouble he was hunting, he was following the right trail to get to it. "Mister," I told him, "any time you think you can kill this farmer, you just have at it." He looked across the fire at me, surprised, I think, because he had expected fear. My clothes showed I was from the hills. A patched old homespun shirt, jeans stuffed into clumsy boots. It was sure that I looked like nothing at all, only if a man looked at the pistol I wore, he could see there'd been a sight of lead shot out of that barrel. "That's enough, Carney," Mr. Belden said sharply. "This man is a guest at our fire." The cook brought me a plate of grub, and it smelled so good I didn't even look up until I'd emptied the plate and another, and swallowed 3 cups of black coffee. Up in the hills we like our coffee strong, but this here would make barbed wire grow on a man's chest in the place of hair. The man with the golden beard watched me, and he said to Mr. Belden, "Boss, you better hire this man. If he can work like he can eat, you've got yourself a hand." "Question is," Carney broke in, "can he fight?" It was mighty quiet around the fire, and when I put my plate aside and got up, "Mister, I didn't kill you before because when I left home, I promised Ma I'd go careful with a gun. But you're a mighty trying man." Carney had the itch all right, and as he looked across the fire at me, I knew that sooner or later I was going to have to kill this man. "You promised Ma, did you?" he scoffed. "Let's see about that." He brought his right foot forward about an inch, and I darn near laughed at him. But then, from behind me, came a warm, rich voice, and it spoke clear and plain. Mister, you just back up and set down. I ain't aiming to let Tyrell hang up your hide right now. So you just set down and cool off. It was Orrin. And knowing Orrin, I knew his rifle covered Carney. Thanks, Orrin. Mom made me promise to go careful. She told me. And lucky for this gent. He stepped down from the saddle, a fine, big, handsome man with shoulders wide enough for two strong men. He wore a belt gun, too, and I knew he could use it. Are you two brothers? Belden asked. Brothers from the hills, Orrin said. Bound west for the new lands. You're hired, Belden said. I like men who work together. So that was how it began. But more had begun that day than any of us could guess. Least of all, the fine-looking man with the beard, who was Tom Sunday, our foreman on the drive. From the moment he had spoken up, all our lives were pointed down a trail together, but no man could read the sign. From the first day, Orrin was a well-loved man, with that big, easy way of his, a wide smile, as well as courage and humor enough for three men. He was a man to ride the trail with. He did his share of the work and more. And at night, around the fire, he would sing or tell yarns. When he sang to the cows in that fine Welsh baritone of his, everybody listened. Nobody paid me much mind. Right off, they saw I could do my work, and they let me do it. When Orrin told them I was the tough one of the two, they just laughed. Only there was two of them that didn't laugh. And of these two, one was Tom Sunday, and the other Cap Roundtree. A thin, wiry old man with a walrus mustache, who looked to have ridden a lot of trails. The third day out, Tom Sunday fetched up alongside me and asked, Ty, what would you have done if Reed Carney had grabbed his gun? Why, Mr. Sunday, I said, I'd have killed him. He glanced at me. Yes, I expect you would have. He swung off then, only turned in his saddle. Call me Tom. I'm not much on long-handled names. Have you seen those Kansas plains? Have you seen the grass stretch away from you to the horizon? Grass and nothing but grass except for flowers here and there, and maybe the white of buffalo bones. The grass moving gentle under the long wind, moving like a restless sea with the hand of God upon it. On the fifth day, when I was riding point by myself, and well out from the herd of a dozen men, came riding out of a ravine, all bunched up. Right off I had a smell of trouble, so instead of waiting for them to come up, I rode right up to meet them. It was a mighty pleasant day, and the air was balmy with summer. Overhead the sky was blue, and only a mite of cloud drifted like a lost white buffalo over the plain of the sky. When they were close, I drew up and waited, my Spencer .56 caliber cradled on my saddle, my right hand over the trigger guard. They drew up, the dirty, rough-looking bunch, and their leader mean enough to sour cream. We're cutting your herd. He was a mighty abrupt man. And we're cutting it now. You come through the settlements and swept a lot of our cattle, and they've ate our grass. Well, I looked at him and I said, I reckon not. Sort of aimless like, I'd switch that Spencer to cover his belt buckle, my right finger on the trigger. Look here, boy. He started into bluster. Mister, I said, this here Spencer ain't no boy. And I just after making a bet with a fellow, he says one of those big buckles like you got would stop a bullet, and me, I figured a chunk of lead, .56 caliber, would drive that buckle right back into your belly. And mister, if you want to be a sport, we can settle that bet. He was right white around the eyes, and if one of the others made a wrong move, I was going to drop the bull of the herd, and as many others as time would allow. Back! It was one of the men behind the leader. I know this boy. This here is one of them sackets I've been telling you about. It was one of those no-account Aikens from Turkey Flat who'd been run out of the mountains for hog stealing. Oh? Back smiled back, kind of sickly. Had no idea you were friends. Boy, he said, you folks just ride on through. Thanks. That there's just what we figured to do. They turned tail around and rode off, and a couple of minutes later, hoofs turned up on the sod, and here came Mr. Belden, Tom Sunday, Cap Roundtree, and Reed Carney, all a sweat and expecting trouble. And when they saw those herd cutters ride off, they were mighty surprised. Ty? Mr. Belden asked. What do those men want? They figured to cut your herd. What happened? They decided not to. He looked at me mighty sharp. Knee and dapple around, I started back to the herd. Now what do you make of that? I could hear Belden saying. I'd have sworn that was back Rand. It was, Roundtree commented dryly. But there's quite a boy. When Orrin asked me about it at the fire that night, I just said Aiken was there, from Turkey Flat. Carney was listening. Aiken who? Who's Aiken? He's from the mountains, Orrin said. He knows the kid. Reed Carney said nothing more, but a couple of times I noticed him sizing me up like he hadn't seen me before. There'd be trouble enough, but man is born to trouble, and it's best to meet it when it comes and not lose sleep until it does. Only there was more than trouble, for beyond the long grass plains were the mountains. The high and lonely mountains, where someday I would ride, and where someday, the good Lord willing, I would find a home. How many trails, and how much dust, and loneliness, and how long a time until then.